We're going to be hearing 4 talks from Ron from his 4-stage spiritual growth program that he's developed over the last 30 years. So he's been a counselor for 30 years now. He got his degree at the University of Ottawa, his bachelor's degree there. And later he went, and very shortly after, he got his master's degree at Holy Names University in California. And that's when he was searching for what do we all have in common in spiritual matters, and that's what he was seeking and searching for, and he's been looking for that over 30 years. And he's been led to certain authors and books and that he's incorporated into his 4-stage spiritual program that he eventually put into a book form called An Inside Job, that outlines the 4 stages of spiritual growth that he's developed. So his goal today is to inspire, enlighten, and empower you. So I want you to sit back, enjoy, and be inspired, enlightened, and empowered. Welcome to our one-day retreat, 12-step choices to spiritual growth, freedom, and power. Ron Quesnel.
Okay, thank you very much for everybody. It's a real privilege to be here this morning. And what I'm sharing with you today has all been by the grace of God. So I'm going to be incorporating in the lessons that we're going to learn, I'm going to be incorporating my story because that's part of it. Many of us don't realize it, but our own individual stories or journey into spiritual growth, even though it's individual to us, is also a universal story. That's what you get in the scriptures, whatever scriptures it is, Christian or Hindu or Buddhist, it doesn't matter. People are revealing in their own story what happened to them and what it did to them. So I'm going to start off with the first stage, and we're going to be covering 3-step choices in each stage, and they're going to last for about a half an hour. So the first stage that's common to everybody in the world, I call it the humbling of the ego and spiritual rebirth experience. So the best way to get started with that is to tell my own story. My own story was that when I was a kid, I was quite spirit-led. I was very close to God. I was an altar boy, I really felt good. I was always helping other people. I was tops in my class. I loved my life. And I used to call myself the millionaire because I was so happy. And then, at the age of 14, one of my best friends was my cousin, Marcel. And Marcel had gone on a holiday, and I was supposed to go with him to my aunt's that summer. And she couldn't take both of us because she wasn't feeling very well. So he went up, and it turned out he went out fishing one day with my little nephew, and my little nephew fell into the water off a cliff, and he jumped in to save him, and they both drowned. And from that day on, I blamed God for taking my cousin away from me. And this is common to a lot of people. When we lose someone we love, we start blaming God. How could this happen to me? So as a result of this experience, I stopped following God, and I started following the crowd, the world, and got into what everybody else was doing. And for me, what everybody else was doing was drinking. So I started going to the bars, and here I am, 16, drinking and having fun with the guys, and thinking that the whole world was just about getting things, making lots of money, getting the big house, getting all the women I could get, all these things was my goal. And I followed that path for over 25 years and became an alcoholic. And as a result of that, I lost myself. I lost my sense of spirit. And I lost everything that I loved. I lost my first wife. She had stayed with me for about 5 years, and she finally said, you know what? You're a drunk, and I'm not living with you anymore. So she took my son and she moved away. And I, being an egotist, in which the whole world centered about me, because the whole world was about me, myself, and I, did not see that loss happening. And I started blaming my wife. It was never me, it was always somebody else that were causing my problems. And that's very important, because a lot of us do that. We blame others instead of looking in at ourselves. And that's what I did. And so, I remarried again a few years later. Same thing happened again. And my wife said, I'm sorry, but I'm not living like this anymore. Because I was a control freak. I would want everything done my way or the highway. And so she left. And I continued to do work that I really didn't like. There were a lot of issues with me that I was completely unaware of. Because an egotist is a person who has an inferiority complex. They don't talk about it. They put on all kinds of different masks. They figure they're very good at manipulating others to get what they want. And I thought I was super at that. And so I did that, and I kept doing that. And again, didn't look at myself. Until finally, at the age of 39, I bottomed out. In other words, I came to a point in my life where I could no longer continue living the way I was living. I had suffered enough. The alcoholism, the egotism, the codependency, all those things had led me to become feeling and thinking that I was useless, a complete failure. I had nothing to offer. There was nothing left. I was a walking dead man. And yet, I still tried to put on that mask. But at this stage in my life, I remember I was living in Montreal. That's where I bottomed out. And I called my parents. And I said, can I come home? Can I come home? My whole family had known all through those 25 years that I was a raving alcoholic. I still had my business. I still did business. I still made money. But I was unhappy. And to give you a picture of what it's like to think you got it all, I remember standing, I finally got the house I wanted on the water. 200 feet of frontage on the water. I had my boathouse. I had everything. And I'm sitting there. My second wife had just left. And I got a glass of wine in my hand. And I'm looking out over the lake. And I've got Sinatra playing in the background saying, I did it my way. There's nothing left. The love's gone. The people are gone. The business is gone. There's nothing left. But that's the kind of setting that we need to go through. That kind of crazy suffering of thinking that the whole universe is about me, myself, and I, and that I don't need other people. I used to ask myself that question sometimes. What the hell are they all doing here? I guess they came to listen to me to tell them how to live their life. Because that's the kind of egotist or alcoholic thinking that goes on in a mind like this. And it doesn't just refer to alcoholics. Everybody in the world at one time or another is a raving egotist saying, I all by myself will do this. And anybody who lives in that kind of world lives in a very hostile world because they figure they're living in a battle zone. It's a war. And I've got to get what's missing from other people. And so continuously, the go-getter. The go-getter. I, all by myself, will do this. Anyway, that gives you a pretty good idea of what an egotist is. And so, once I finally called my parents, I was like the prodigal son. So, you all know the story of the prodigal son from the scriptures? All right. The prodigal son was the Son of God. And one day he said, hey, Dad, I don't need you anymore. I'm going to go out and do it on my own. And he went out and did it on his own, and he did like me. He followed the crowd. He followed the crowd. What the world told him was important. Getting all these outer physical things in your life is going to make you happy. When all the time, nothing on the outside can make you happy unless you're connected with your Creator. And so the prodigal son goes through his life, a life of riotous living. And that was my life. And finally, bottoms out, whatever you want to call it. In people in recovery from alcoholism, they call it bottoming out. But there are other expressions as a counselor that I found. Bottoming out could be a nervous breakdown. It could be a midlife crisis. Whatever you want to call it, it's a bottoming out. And so when I hit my bottom and I called my parents and said, can I come home? They were happy to receive me. And I was happy to come to their home. As a matter of fact, I had to borrow the money to take the train from Montreal to Windsor, Ontario. But when I got there, my brothers welcomed me at the train station, brought me home, and I felt safe. It was a safe place for me. And about 2 weeks after I was there, I had a very, very powerful spiritual experience. Every time I talk about it, my heart comes into my mouth. And here's what happened to me. I bottomed out and I said, God, because the only God I knew was the religious God that I had been raised with. I was a Roman Catholic. And I'll tell you, one of the things that I got out of that was a very punishing God. My idea of God was somebody standing up there with a hammer, waiting to stomp me for everything I did and anything I did. So when I had this experience, it was a dream state. I was in a dream state. It was very real. And I had said, God, if you're real, help me. I can't go on anymore. I can't go on the way I've been living anymore. And so, all of a sudden, in this dream state, I felt like God was holding me in His arms. Like I've never been held like that before in my life. He was holding me in His arms and He was rocking me back and forth. And He was telling me, Ron, I love you. I love you. Well, I didn't think I was lovable. And it touched me so much. He touched me so much. I looked up. I wanted to see His face. I couldn't see His face. Couldn't see His face, but I felt the love. And as He held me in His arms, I saw myself on the top of a mountain, a very high mountain. And to me, as I reflect about that through the years, that mountain was the ego that I had built over all those years. And it was a mountain. And I was on the top of a mountain, and I looked up and I said, like I said, God, if you're real, catch me. And I stepped off the edge in a leap of faith. And that's when He caught me and rocked me in his arms and told me that he loved me. And he told me, you will never have to drink again to run away from yourself. So all my life, I had been running away from myself. Because in my ego world, the world was just about me, myself, and I. There were no other people there. There was no love in that life, even though I thought I was a loving person. It was all about me. And in that same dream, my whole life flashed before my eyes, like a little movie. And I saw how, because of my egotism, I had hurt so many people by not caring what I said to them or how I felt. I was, like I said, I was a complete control freak. And as he did that and told me that he forgave me and that he loved me, my water broke. I call it my water broke because another thing that occurred to me was that for years and years, over 25 years, by the drinking, by my actions, by my thinking, what had happened was that my whole life, the real character traits were guilt, shame, and fear. And when he told me that he loved me, it was like that dam that I had, that pent-up emotional feelings, the dam broke, and I cried profusely. It was a spiritual rebirth. And God's Spirit had come into my heart. His love had come into my heart. And he told me that I could start my life over again. So I know what 40 years in the desert means. 40 years in an egotistic life is killing to anyone. All right? So, the first step choice that we all have to make at one time or another, no matter what our backgrounds is, but the similar background of egotism, me, myself, and I universe, is that I have to admit to myself. In the AA program they say, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol. Well, I was powerless over alcohol, but I was also powerless over my egotism, my sense of me, myself, and I. So I admitted I was powerless of myself, that I could do nothing. Okay? And my whole life had become unmanageable. I mean, my finances, my relationships, they were all finished. And here now God was telling me you could start over again. And so the second stage, or the second step choice, after we admit that of ourselves we can do nothing, then we come to realize that there is a power greater than ourselves, a creator greater than ourselves, who created us, like me. And I could start my whole life over again with this belief in this loving God. All right? And that's what I did. And so when God touched me that way, I also made another choice, the third choice. I decided that since 25 years of making my own choices had ruined my whole life and there was nothing left, I think God, or Father, I call him Father, Mother, God, Father mind, Mother love. You see, we have a mind, that's the male in us, and we have a heart, that's the female. So Father, Mother isn't two separate beings, it's one being. And I connected my mind with that heart. And I made the decision to turn my will and my life over to that higher power that I had experienced so powerfully. And of course, I met other people who had gone through the similar things, and they helped me to do that. So one of the things that I want to finish off with in this morning's session is that I want you to have an open mind. Have an open mind to what I'm going to share with you that I've learned over the years. Because, well, I think the most important thing is I should tell you a little bit, too, about after I turned my will and my life over to God. This is very important because it happens to everybody. I said, God, what do you want me to do with my life? I've been a raving alcoholic for 25 years. What have I got to offer other people? And God said, well, glad you asked. You have been to hell trying to live your life by yourself, not really caring about other people, and running after all these things on the outside. So, because of your experience, I don't waste anything. So you can use that experience to help other people. And I said, wow, what a miracle. God takes lemons and makes lemonade. There is nothing wasted in our lives unless we think it is. But God doesn't waste anything that we do. He takes everything that we've been through so that we can use that to help other people. And not only help other people, but understand other people. To comfort other people when we see where they're at. So that's what God did to me. He said, do you remember, Ron, when you were a kid? Remember when you were pretty close to me there? He said, do you remember the dream I gave you? And I said, the dream? And then I remembered. Well, when I was a kid, I said I was an ultimate. I wanted to be a priest. He says, yeah. He says, I gave you that dream. I want you to follow that dream. I said, I'm 39 years old. If I follow that dream, that means, holy cripe, I got to go back to school. But you know what? This time, it wasn't me running the show. And God had given me the faith. The faith. So, I told my brothers, my sister, my mother, I'm making an application. I'm going back to school. And they said, where are you going? Don't forget, they'd seen me be an alcoholic for 25 years. I said, I'm going to theology school. Theology school, you got to be out of your mind. And you got to watch that, you know, because if you have a spiritual experience, let me tell you, you don't run to just anybody to tell them what your spiritual experience is, because they'll tell you, you're out of your mind. If they haven't had an experience like that. But it didn't matter. My whole life had been a waste by trying to run it myself, and this time God was calling me. So, and it turned out it was perfect. Everything's perfect with God. My brothers, who had seen me drink for 25 years, their store, they were going to lose their store back in the 80s, early 80s. The interest rates were really high. And they had to let go of all their staff. And here I was living at my parents', and I had to pay them, and I didn't have a source of income anymore. So I said to them, I said, listen, I'll help you out until I go back to school. I'll help you out. I work at the store. And I get to know everybody in the community, things like that. And I'll tell you what, I'll ask Mom and Dad and how much they want for rent every week. So I went to them, this back in the 80s, they said, $15. And I figured I needed $15 too for myself. So I went back to my brothers and I said, okay, I'll work for you 6 days a week, $30 a week, plus cigarettes. Then they said, okay, you're not okay. And so I did that. And a year later, I got a letter from the St. Paul's University in Ottawa that I was accepted to go into theology as an adult student. And when I left, their business was in the black. And not only was their business in the black, but we started doing things. We developed the Businessmen's Association. We got people together in the community. It was fantastic. But Ron did not step in and try to control things anymore. He just let things be, did what he could, and let others flourish. And everybody flourished. So that's my story. on that. And so before we get into the next session, I want to talk about one more thing. One of the things that I learned over the years, I brought this globe in today. So I wanted you to get an idea about God. Now everybody's got their ideal of God. I remember at one time I thought I had my God, Gary had his God, Elise had her God, Dion had his God. We all had our different gods. And I had communication with that God. I did it through prayer and meditation. And then I came to realize, because I wanted to know what was common to everybody. And over the years I came to realize that living in a spiritual world is also a mental world. And that there was a power, an infinite, universal intelligence that created us all. And it wasn't just an intelligence, it was a love force that had created the whole universe. And so we all live, now this is the globe of planet Earth, but that spirit, that mind, is in everything, not only on the planet, but created the whole universe. And so if a person is not in tune or in touch with their Creator, they're not in tune with the universe. Because once a person's in tune with that love force or that divine mind that's in all of us, in all people everywhere, not just in some, reminds me of that song by John Lennon, Imagine. Imagine everybody living in peace. Imagine everybody connected to the same divine intelligence and love force. And we all have to have our own experience of that. But it's the same God, the same Father, Mother God. Father mind, Mother love force. And we'll be talking about that more in the second talk. So, there's the first 3 step choices that are common to everybody in the world. And every one of us has to have our own experience of that. You cannot pick it up from somebody else. I cannot run to a broker to go to God. I always loved that about, one of the people that I followed a lot was Jesus. And not because he was Christian. As far as I'm concerned, Jesus did not come here to establish a Christian religion. He came here to tell us who we really, really are, that we're all sons and daughters of God, that we can overcome any difficulty that we go through, and that's common to everybody in the world. That's why his prayer always starts off, and it starts off with mine, Our Father. It doesn't say, oh, sorry, this is only for Christians, or this is only for Buddhists. None of these people who came along and developed the spiritual growth programs meant it for everybody. And so there's another change of consciousness for us. So these 12 steps are all about a change of consciousness, which is also a change of heart. Because without changing the feeling nature in us, we don't touch the love that's in us. Because we all have our own gifts and talents to share with others. And anybody who's in recovery, spiritual, self-discovery, recovery, is a miracle. I am a walking miracle. I was raised from the dead. They say, well, no, I read about that in some scriptures or something, but hey, I don't believe that's true. I don't believe that can happen. I don't believe in miracles. Well, every one of us here is a miracle. We're all a creation of God. And our true identity, instead of being egotists, separate me, myself, and I, are now a we program. We need each other. We all have something to contribute. our dream to fulfill that God has given us. And when we're in touch with this power, this universal mind or love force, anything and everything is possible to us. There's no limits with God. And we're all individualized expressions of God. That's who we really are. And so, as a result, especially with me when I do, alcohol and drug counseling, that's eventually what I became. I'll care a little bit more about that later on. But I see people walking around thinking they're powerless, no good, low self-esteem, because maybe it's alcoholism. It's a lot to do with their stinking thinking, and they don't know it. That's the disease. And so they shoot themselves down. They think they have nothing to offer. They don't care about other people. They hate. They see the world as hostile. And yet all the time, when they're ready to surrender, because nobody can do that for somebody else, when they're ready to surrender the ego, then jump into that spirit and connect with their greater, higher power, then they become powerful. Then they become beautiful. Then they become lovers of humanity. And they know they're being led and guided and supported and inspired and enlightened by loving God. And that's what the whole thing is about today, is bringing us out of powerlessness and helping us to see how much power we really do. And it's not an ego trip. This is a journey into realizing the love that needs to be expressed in each and every one of us. Thanks.
Leading the Spiritual Freedom Center is Executive Director Ron Quesnel. Interested in joining a retreat, purchasing our book An Inside Job, or taking part in our one-year course, Choices for Freedom? We would love to hear from you. Contact us at ronquesnel@shaw.ca and visit our website at spiritualfreedomcenter.com.